Hi there, I'm Professor Blackmore, and I want to welcome you to ProfessorBlackmore.com, where our goal is to empower results through real productivity. And if you haven't had a chance to visit my channel before, I want to ask that you please subscribe to my YouTube channel and click the bell so you'll be notified whenever I post new videos. And please also follow me on TikTok and Instagram. And today, I want to talk to you about even further developments surrounding the Alec Baldwin shooting on the set of the movie Rust in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And it seems like there's something new every day in this case. And you'll want to be sure to subscribe to my channel because I'll be coming back to you soon to talk about developments surrounding the warrant for Alec Baldwin's cell phone. But today, I'm coming back to you to talk about a civil lawsuit filed by the armorer against the supplier of ammunition used on the set. Now, this is a very interesting detail and it's something that's very novel litigation strategy in a case. And just to give you some brief background information, we're at this point because Alec Baldwin was in the process of producing a Western-style movie called Rust on a movie set in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And in the process of production of the movie, while rehearsing a scene, a live round was fired from a gun held by Alec Baldwin, killing the director of photography, Helena Hutchins. Now, when this all first happened weeks ago, we heard the attorneys for the armorer, Hannah Gutierrez Reed, allege that they believed that sabotage was at work on the set of the movie. And now, several weeks into the investigation of how live rounds ended up on the set and into Alec Baldwin's prop gun, this lawsuit filed by the armorer claims to have the answer. And I have a copy of the lawsuit right here, and I've been reading all of the interesting details. And I have to give it to the attorneys. They sure have my attention. Most lawsuits tend to be very dry and lacking in the area of interesting details. But this lawsuit reads like a novel. And while it seems to have a theme that alleges something very close to sabotage, I really can't see why the ammunition supplier would commit sabotage. I mean, it would completely demolish him and his company. But early on, I thought sabotage could be one of the theories surrounding this unfortunate event that may have been committed by someone who may have lost their mind as a result of the heated disagreements in the movie industry surrounding union-related matters. Now, if the facts laid out in the lawsuit are true, they could border very closely on the line of recklessness, but not on the part of Alec Baldwin, and more in the direction of the supplier of the ammunition on the set. So, one thing still remains to be accurate, and that is, if there is criminal liability to be found, it will be on the part of whoever caused the live rounds to be introduced on the set. And if that person is not Alec Baldwin, whoever it is causes the criminal liability against Alec Baldwin to be lower and lower as more facts start to point in another direction on that point of reference. Now, on January the 12th, 2022, the armorer, Hannah Gutierrez Reed, filed a civil suit against the individual owner of the company and the company that provided the ammunition and guns to the Rust movie production. The civil filing against Seth Kenney and his business, PDQ Arm and Prop LLC, alleges the ammunition boxes containing the rounds used in the guns failed to state a material fact, i.e., that those boxes contain both dummy and live ammunition, which were deceptively sold to the movie production company. The lawsuit describes friction between Seth Kenney and the armorer Hannah Gutierrez Reeves that played out in text messages sent by Seth Kenney to numerous individuals, including the armorer Hannah Gutierrez Reeves. Now, this is what Seth Kenney said in an interview in December.
It's not a possibility that they came from PDQ or from myself personally.
Overnight, Kenney telling ABC News investigators thoroughly examined the PDQ Arm and Prop LLC inventory and concluded that PDQ's portion of dummy rounds and blanks supplied to Rust were safe. As a result, Seth Kenney and PDQ Arm and Prop LLC are not of interest in the ongoing investigation.
Now, I have 3 things to say about this. Number 1, I'm going to go through the facts from the lawsuit that raised my eyebrow. And if true, I don't see how Seth Kenney can say with a straight face that there is no possibility that the live rounds came from PDQ. I can see him saying merely that the rounds didn't come from PDQ, but for him to say that there is no possibility that live rounds came from PDQ, if his company has any live rounds that they supply to anybody at all, if there are any live rounds at his business that he sells to people, then there is a possibility that live rounds came from PDQ. Number 2, even if investigators really thought the rounds from PDQ supplied to Rust were in fact safe, they would never make a statement that conclusive to Seth Kenney until the investigation was completely concluded. As a matter of fact, they wouldn't make a statement that conclusive to anybody. And so that's just fluff or puffery, as we call it, from Seth Kenney. And number 3, everybody got so upset when Alec Baldwin stated that he was not criminally responsible for this tragedy, but nobody seems to be bothered by the fact that Seth Kenney is saying that he and his business PDQ are of no interest to the sheriff's investigation. I mean, the sheriff was clearly bothered by Alec Baldwin saying essentially the same thing in his interview with and to George Stephanopoulos. But Seth Kenney is saying the same thing on ABC's air as well, and it's no big deal to the sheriff. The sheriff himself and the DA claim that nobody has been excluded. And so I've read this lawsuit, and it reads again like a movie script. It lays out some very detailed facts. And let me just say right off the bat that I see 7 interesting, eye-raising facts. And that's a lot for a person like me. I mean, nothing really moves me. I've seen a lot in my career, and so I'm not really moved by much, but there are a lot of interesting details here. Now, the first thing that is very eye-raising is the report of the use of what has been identified as Starline brass ammo. Now, apparently, Starline Brass is a company that produces ammo brass casings that can be made into dummy, blank, or even live ammunition by anyone with the knowledge and equipment to do so. Now, in other words, potentially, a person can take previously live ammo in these casings and convert them into dummy or blank rounds, and presumably vice versa. So it still remains to be seen if all of the ammo on the set came from PDQ. We can draw 3 inferences from the detailed facts laid out in this lawsuit, though. Number 1, most of the ammo supplied for the set came from Seth Kenney and PDQ. And then number 2, Seth Kenney used Starline brass ammo. And number 3, the actual round that killed Helena Hutchins came from and was from a Starline brass ammo casing. Now, much is being made about the fact that the armorer should have been able to recognize dummy rounds from live rounds. But if you have someone using their own equipment to convert previously live rounds into dummy rounds and or blank rounds, and vice versa, this may not be as clear-cut as everybody thinks it should be. Now, this is going to be a fact that it still remains wide open, but if this was a practice that was being carried out by the supplier, in my opinion, it is something that should have been made known to the movie's production team so they could have made a decision on whether or not they wanted to use that type of dummy round ammunition. So this is critical. And since the casing was the same as was known to be used by Seth Kenney and the same type that caused the fatal shooting, this Starline brass ammo, then there's no way that I can see that Seth Kenney can say with any level of credibility that it's not a possibility at all that the ammo came from PDQ or from himself personally. Now, here's another eye-raising fact. There were 3 young women working in the prop department. The prop manager, Sarah Zachary, the armorer, Hannah Gutierrez Reed, and another young lady by the name of Nicole. Sarah and Hannah were 24 years old and Nicole was 19 years old. So, in my mind, these are extremely young individuals who were presumably inexperienced for such an extremely important job that will require extreme attention to detail. Apparently, Hannah Gutierrez Reed was filling dual roles in the prop department along with her armorer duties for a total of $7,500 for the entire job, for the entirety of both roles on the set. So, while I don't have any experience in the movie production industry, it seems to me very low budget. It seems that when you're dealing with something that has the potential for fatality that something like handling guns does, you might want to have a higher level or a larger budget for something of such a magnitude of importance. Now, here's another interesting fact, or in my mind, eye-raising detail. We'd heard of accidental discharges of weapons on the set, but there were no real facts describing exactly what happened. Well, if true, according to the lawsuit, Sarah was the person who accidentally discharged one of the guns, causing a dummy round to be fired at or near her foot. Apparently, Hannah Gutierrez Reed, the armorer, wanted to report this to production or to the leadership and management team on the movie set, but she was advised by, guess who? Seth Kenney, not to report the incident because it could impact Sarah's ability to handle weapons on the set. Apparently, and based on the facts of the lawsuit, Seth Kenney was the person who referred Sarah and Hannah Gutierrez Reed for their jobs in the prop department on the movie set. So potentially, Seth and Sarah were acquaintances and knew each other. And so this incident was the source of the text message argument between Seth Kenney and Hannah Gutierrez Reed that was referenced earlier. Apparently, Seth Kenney wanted the armorer, Hannah Gutierrez Reed, to keep quiet about the accidental incident involving Sarah. Now, I know I'm going to get a lot of comments in the comments section, but I'm going to say this anyway. If this is true, and no one said anything about this to the production leadership or ownership team, i.e. Alec Baldwin, then this would be consistent with Alec Baldwin's claims to George Stephanopoulos in his interview that he did not know about the accidental discharges that had taken place on the set. So, the lawsuit also makes reference to another accidental discharge committed by the person who was playing the role of Alec Baldwin's stunt double. But the facts do not state whether Hannah Gutierrez Reed or Alec Baldwin knew of this incident prior to the fatal shooting of Helena Hutchins. Now, another fact that was quite interesting is that when the armorer loaded the gun that day, she was able to get only 5 rounds into the gun, but when she attempted to load the 6th and final dummy round, it wouldn't go in the gun. So when Alec Baldwin was using the gun in the first part of the day before everybody broke for lunch, it only had 5 dummy rounds in it. Later, after lunch, when the armorer cleaned the gun and the facts don't really provide any detail into what that cleaning process entailed. But after doing so, she was able then to load that 6th round into the gun. Now, clearly, whatever she loaded into the gun looked like the other dummy rounds that she loaded into the gun. I mean, I'm thinking she's not a dummy, no pun intended. But everybody's making a lot about the fact that she should have known just from looking at those rounds that they were dummy rounds. But we have no idea at this point because we don't have all of the facts surrounding whether or not these were regular dummy rounds or whether these were repurposed dummy rounds or what. And so I'm no gun expert, but something seems to be off about the look of these so-called dummy rounds that were provided to her to use on the set. And for whatever reason, it does not seem that it was apparent from the look of these so-called dummy rounds that they were in fact dummy rounds. But it seems apparent that something was not right about the makeup of these rounds if one of them presumably did not fit into the gun. Now again, I don't know what's customary or if this is customary in the industry because again, I'm not a gun expert. But the facts state that the armorer confirmed, she was in the practice of confirming whether or not they were dummy rounds or not in the boxes that she was given by shaking the boxes. So I don't know if that's some type of practice. It just seems to me that she would have needed to take each one out, look at it, and inspect it to make sure that it was a dummy round. But again, how much can you do? It is what is or is not on the inside. And the only person who would be able to certify that would be Seth Kenney or whoever was supplying the dummy ammunition to the set. Now, here's another, a 5th eye-raising interesting fact that was laid out in the lawsuit, which indicates that after lunch, the assistant director summoned Hannah Gutierrez Reed to the church on the set to bring the gun on the set to be used by Alec Baldwin. But when she got there, Alec Baldwin was not on the set. Notwithstanding, she gave the gun to the assistant director, who said he'd hold on to it until Alec Baldwin returned. And so due to COVID-19 protocols, which again is another interesting detail or interesting wrinkle, it was just like a calamity of errors that all built up into this unfortunate scenario. But because of COVID-19 protocols, the armorer could not remain in the church until Alec Baldwin returned. So apparently, instead of taking the gun back and locking it up, the armorer told the assistant director to let her know when Alec Baldwin returned so that she could personally recheck the rounds in the gun, give Alec Baldwin some safety admonishments, and personally hand the gun to him. But when Alec Baldwin returned, instead of calling the armorer back to the set, the assistant director himself handed the gun to Alec Baldwin, and soon after, the fatal shooting occurred. Now, according to the armorer, Alec Baldwin should not have been pointing the gun in the direction of anyone on the set. She states this in the facts of her lawsuit. And she also states that someone should have told him that, and that if she had been there on the set and had been called back to hand the gun to him personally, she would have told him that he should not be pointing the gun in anyone's direction. Now, here is another interesting, almost jaw-dropping fact that was revealed in the lawsuit. And that is that immediately after the gun was fired, but before the law enforcement officials arrived, the armorer, Hannah Gutierrez Reed, claims that she asked the prop manager, Sarah, to check the rounds in the box to see if there were any other live rounds. And the facts allege that Sarah confirmed that there were other rounds, other live rounds in the box of so-called dummy rounds, and the law enforcement officials confirmed that there were another 7 live rounds in the box of so-called dummy rounds. And so if true, that is completely and utterly jaw-dropping, okay? And these are not the only interesting details laid out in the civil suit. I could go on, but these are just some of the top line eye-raising facts that I saw. The lawsuit really does read like a book or a novel or a movie script. I find Seth Kenney to be high on the list of liable individuals in this case, notwithstanding his assertion that there is no way that any of the live rounds came from PDQ. I find his involvement to be highly suspect. As I have said in my prior videos, this is all still on the level of civil liability as it relates to Alec Baldwin. And I know that's gonna make some of you upset. But don't judge me. That's just my legal opinion after 20 years of law practice experience. And again, there were too many mistakes to name them all. I admit that. This case is full of civil liability. If Helena Hutchins' husband files suit and it makes it to a jury, there is no way that Alec Baldwin would not be found to have civil liability on the highest level. But you need a higher level of culpability for a criminal suit. And I believe this is even true, even if it's found to be true that Alec Baldwin actually pulled the trigger. Because this is a movie set where they thought that they were working with a gun, although real. Everybody thought the set was safe because everyone involved thought the only rounds on the set were dummy rounds or blanks. Somebody handed a gun to Alec Baldwin, and the person handing the gun to him declared out loud that the gun was safe. And then, according to Alec Baldwin, although the armorer states that she would have advised him otherwise, the actual deceased individual instructed him to point the gun in the direction that he pointed it. But if you have a person who took on the liability of doing something as important as making dummy rounds by repurposing live rounds, and he does not advise his customers of this fact, and or that he has an operation wherein he could mistakenly mix up live rounds with dummy rounds, now you're getting in the neighborhood of reckless behavior of anyone involved in such a practice. And so we'll have to see how this all shakes out. There still seems to be a lot of things that are not clear. But what do you think? Do you think this ammunition supplier should be held criminally liable if he mistakenly provided live rounds in the box of dummy rounds? Or what about this? Do you think that Alec Baldwin should still be held criminally liable, even if this turns out to be true? If so, please leave your comments in the comment section of this video. And until next time, if you've enjoyed this video, please give me a big thumbs up. And please also subscribe to my YouTube channel and click the bell so you'll be notified whenever I post my next video on this topic. And please also follow me on TikTok and Instagram.